His street name was Daylight, but he was a nightmare. On the streets of New York, there was darkness and violence, and it rained. My guest today began selling drugs when he was only 11 years old, and by age 16, he had served his first stint at the notorious Rikers Island prison. His only way to survive was to continue reigning over those streets. He would become the richest, the most powerful, the most notorious person in the hood, or he would die trying, he said. Street God is the true story of one man's dangerous journey through the underworld of crime and drugs and almost certain death. But it was an encounter with a real God that saved his life. Dimas, we are so happy that you're here with us, man.
So glad to be with you.
You know, I was reading this book, and first of all, if I can just say to the folks at home, please make sure you go to the e-store and get a copy of this book. It reads like a novel, and you forget sometimes that it's a real story. This guy's not making this stuff. He actually lived this. And Dimas, I had to keep reminding myself, you know, this isn't just a great plot line. He's not just an amazing writer, but this man actually endured these things, and he survived to tell the story, and that in and of itself is miraculous.
Yeah, I was reminded of it as well last night flying in here.
What happened?
You know, I flew in, and my name still...
From Queens?
Yeah, from
New
Queens,
York.
from LaGuardia, and my name still popped up on the list as a drug dealer. So
all these years later.
Yeah, so I got detained for several hours, fingerprinted here in Toronto. But I love Canada. So I know they were just doing their job, and got finished around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but it was awesome because you were able to share Christ with the guy at the border.
That's right. That's right. Great. He was doing his job. Lovely man. And he said, I'm a Christian, but not quite as committed as you. And I had the chance to really just pray with him and share Christ with him. And he just kept saying, you know what, you're a really good guy. And I said, well, thank you. I said, it's through God that has made me this way. And he said, I know. He said, I've been reading about you during this whole time.
That's amazing.
So God shows up in such unique ways.
You know, and God showed up in an incredible way in your life, and I want to build to that, to how you came to faith, because at the beginning of the book, you're so lost, you're so out there, you're so far away from God, and you're like, God, can this guy really come to you? This guy who's so driven by the world and by drugs and power and money, can he really come to you? And when you did, I had to put the book down, because I almost began to weep, because I was so excited with you, because I knew the moment you got saved, God was going to use you powerfully.
Yes.
And I know he's going to use this interview to speak to so many people who are watching. But I want you to tell us your story, Dimas. I want you to tell us a little bit about growing up in the Queens area and how you got involved in the first place in the whole drug industry.
I mean, I grew up in what one would say was an environment that this story should not be written. I mean, middle-class home. Yeah. My mother was a principal of a school. My father was a corrections officer and captain
of a
jail. Yeah, and but crack cocaine came through our community so strong, and Queens was a really, really wealthy area.
Okay.
So just imagine, on your way to school, you started to see kids that were, 14 and 15, pulling up with, BMWs, Cadillacs, Mercedes-Benz. And I said, well, what is this? And then people started telling me it's, this new drug called crack. And then I remember.
What year was this?
This was like in the 89, 90, around that time. And the crack epidemic was just ripping through New York City. And in Queens, one drug block is known for making $150,000 a day in selling drugs. So I remember my mother was telling me, oh, you know what? And God-loving woman, she would say, you can have these things when you graduate from college. You can do this when you graduate from college. But a part of me, the sinful side of me, was like, I want it now. I want it right now. And I know there's a way to get it now. So I started to seek out one of the biggest drug dealers I could find that could guide me into selling. And then I quickly learned if I work with them, I would probably be killed. So then I ventured to open up my own operation.
But how old were you when you wanted to seek out this drug dealer, this drug lord?
I was age 11.
Age 11, and he was that accessible, or they were that accessible?
I sold drugs at age 11.
Wow.
And when I should have been, playing with some basketball or something else. Yeah, they were available. They were open because I was tall. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if they could see, but I'm 6'6", the size of Michael Jordan.
He's a tall dude.
So you
Yeah.
know, I was brought into that world very, very young and discipled in that road of darkness at a young age.
So what drove you to want to build this drug empire? What was it? The money? Was it the notoriety, the success? What was it?
It was the power. It was the money, and there was just a very strong pull of darkness that was driving me to this. And you know, I wanted it, and I saw I could do it, and I realized after a while I was very good at it. You know, just like any business, the drug business has winners and losers. They have people that rise to the top. So before you know it, I became a street god at a very young age. Around 15, I was running 3 and 4 different drug blocks. And I was beat to death. You know, I almost got my fingers cut off. I was locked in this place.
I remember in that little room behind the door.
Yeah, it was called The Hole.
That's right.
And this was a very low time where for 9 months I started to use my own product. And I was locked into this wood box called The Hole. They beat me half to death. I could hardly even articulate words. And there was a hole that money just kept coming through, and I had to shove money out. And when the guy was beating me, when he was about to shoot me in my head because some guys had robbed me, I just said, you know, the only words I was able to get out was, I'm only 15. And he just stopped, and he's in jail now for murder.
Wow.
So he was killing people on a regular. Yeah.
And that saved you.
Yeah, I know right now it was the prayers of my mother, and there was something about when I said that he just woke out of a trance, because he's a serial killer.
Wow. Now, how much of your life did your mom know about? Was she aware of what was going on, and to what level?
You know, I really broke my mother's hearts, and that's why my heart goes out to mothers that are even viewing right now. And I hope they would be encouraged, you know, that never give up on your children.
Amen.
Because when God got a hold of me, he completely turned this thing around. And my mother, she just went to a church. She wasn't really that engaged in a church. She just started to go and to give my name to a church to pray for me.
Wow.
And right around that time, God started to show up in little glimpses over and over again. So, you know, it was powerful.
One verse that kept coming to me as I was reading your book, and I would read it every night. I had it on my iPad, and I was flying across the country, and I was reading it. Like I said, I couldn't put it down because it reads like a Hollywood movie. And I remember getting to one of the points where you were talking about, you know, pursuing all of this, and you were being so far away from God. And the verse that kept coming to me was, you know, train up a child in the way they should go.
Yes.
And when they're older, they won't depart. So I love what you said, that don't give up hope. Never stop praying for that wayward child, because you never know what God can do. Amen?
Just recently, I got a letter of a young man that tried to hang himself. And somebody cut the cord, cut the wire for him. So he said his eyes was rolling back. He lived. And he was incarcerated. And an inmate next to him banged on his cell after he told him this story. He said, read Street God. The guy read it. He sent me a letter, said, I read it in a day and a half. And he said, from that point on, he said, I know my life has meaning. I know there's something great that God has for me, and I'm going to use my life to live. What's been profound is people have been reading this book as one of the highest percentages of people finishing it in 2 days.
Wow.
So we've been so grateful for that, and to see how this is changing lives of young people, bringing hope to mothers. And, you know, my mother, I'm not going to say that she was one of those Easter goers. You know, she went to church on Easter
and Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, Christmas and Easter. And but later on in her life, when she saw that my life changed, she started to really go every day from that point on.
Tell me about the definitive moment. I remember reading in the book when a rival came to you and he went back home for a funeral for his brother and he wasn't told about that. And he came back very angry. And tell me quickly about what went down there.
Well, I heard a knock on the door, and I didn't know a lot about the Bible, but I grabbed it and I opened it up, and I just thought, when you open up the Bible, whatever you saw, that was God speaking to you. And it said, do ye have little faith? And I remember saying, God, I have faith in you. I have faith in you. So I walked out, I locked the door behind me and closed it. There standing in front of me was a friend whose brother was just murdered. And I looked to the right and I saw a car was running with some guys in it. And I put it together quickly. They're going to murder me. And then they're going to take all my money, probably kill the people that were upstairs asleep, and they were going to drive to New York. So I walked out, and he said, come with me on the side of the house. On the side of the house was my main enemy. And I said, with these two together, I'm done. So I just, at that moment, I mustered up the energy to tell God, I said, God, you've got to get me through this. He pulled out the gun, put it to my head, and he said, my brother's dead. He said, yo, man, you're not there for me. And I stood there and I just said, Jesus. And he pulled the trigger and it went snap. And I'm looking. Then he pulled it again, snap. And I'm there like jerking. He's like, snap, snap. And he's pulling it, snap. He's pulling it, snap. And by the power of God, no bullets came out of that gun. He looked at his friend. He said, let's go. And they took off running. And at that moment, I just looked up to Jesus. I said, God, if you're this real, I will do anything that you want me to do. I am in your hands. And from that moment, I've been following God ever since. I've never let that prayer down.
Man, this is only part one. We have to have you back. Will you come back on Huntley Street?
Oh, I would. It would be an honor. We love Canada. We want to come back. It'll be a better experience this time, I'm sure.
I mean, we just got to the point where you accepted Christ, but so much has happened since then. And I just want to encourage you who are at home and you're hearing Dimas' story, and maybe it's not that involved and it's not that crazy and out of control. And maybe it's not you yourself, but you might have a grandson or a granddaughter, a niece, a nephew, a son or a daughter who's starting to kind of go wayward and go the wrong way, and you don't know what to do. And you've just been flipping channels this morning, and you happen to cross on 100 Huntley Street. And I want you to know that God has ordained for you to be watching this program, to hear this man's story, to know that no one is beyond the reach of God. And I want to encourage you to call the prayer lines right now. We have people who are here 24 hours, 7 days a week, and they will pray with you. And we're going to believe that God is going to change your circumstances. Amen?